Yeah!
Classic us.
That's right. Welcome to Personal Flash Paper, an Infinity podcast with a focus on beginner topics, community, and hobby in the game of Infinity. On this episode, possibly a smallish discussion of Phil CollinsAnd's solo work, hobby desk, no seriously, like where my hobby desk is actually going and its construction, and whatever Ryan's working on, the rule of the episode, ambush camouflage, and the main topic, faction glass slipper, getting it to fit. With your hosts, Rob
and Ryan.
All right, we're back for a second episode in this grand season number 3. So Ryan, what have you been up to?
Nothing. Sort of, but not really.
I almost spit out beer all over my computer and setup here in the home office.
Yeah. So I have not done a whole lot outside of I got some ideas for how I'm gonna convert my Akari. So I placed a bunch of orders to other miniature companies and got some pieces in. So the first 2 models of the Akari with Oni masks are done. They're sitting here on my desk now. They need to get primed and then painted, but I mean, when I say done, I mean they're converted. I've got to wait on another order of some stuff to come in to kind of finish some of those out before I really start churning those guys out. However, I did play 2 games last night with the list and have decided I needed to change it up a bit. So I now need to go back to the drawing board on a couple models and see what I can do there.
So this is your Akari / Black Lotus. As I understand, you are the top Black Lotus because there are other members in your organization that may be the bottom Black Lotus.
We do not divulge the hierarchy of the working inner sanctum of the Black Lotus. Hail Hydra.
Right. So you're working on kind of a very Japanese or Oni type theme for your stuff, or maybe you can talk about that in the hobby section.
So now or later?
Well, I really want to talk more about the hierarchy of the Black Lotus and, maybe when the Black Lotus will make its next appearance.
The Black Lotus has many plans and will reveal all in due time.
So be patient.
Yes, the Syndicate is in constant negotiations with appearances and places we want to leave our mark.
It sounds like you might need an agent for the bookings.
I mean, we're pretty damn popular.
in your own mind.
This is literally 100% of my target audience.
Well, that is a true statement. That is a true statement.
Yep. What about you? Are you doing anything hobby desk besides actually figuring out where your hobby desk is going?
Nope. It's pretty much right now just the dream. The dream is alive of having a 3D printer, having a place where I can actually sit my happy ass, drink a nice cold brew, and sling some paint. That's where I'm at right now in the planning stages. I was talking with Josh from Warstein Studios, and he was asking about the paint desk and where the paint desk was going, and I was just like, dude, I haven't had a chance to really sit and think other than this doodle pad of where I want things to go, and right now it looks like a treasure map for Indiana Jones to try to decipher.
Yep, speaking of Warstein, he finished my trucks or trains, which are actually semi-truck pieces that were kind of turning into a train. And I've got those in hand. They're pretty sweet. Not gonna lie, it's probably gonna take me a while to get everything put together for that table because it essentially involves an entire new table that I'm working on. But I haven't really done much except for pull it out and kind of lay it down there and be like, oh, okay, that'll work. That's cool.
Just setting it up.
I heard him too. Oh yeah, I said it. But since you mentioned it, what is your beverage of the episode, Rob?
Because this is another Infinity podcast, I figured I would go with Space Camper, which is a cosmic IPA made by Boulevard here in Kansas City.
Nice. I myself am having a little rum and coke with the last of my bones rum, which is a nice vanilla flavor. I'm a big fan of that.
Oh, that's nice. That's
Yeah,
nice.
it's very nice.
Yeah, it was a toss-up between the cosmic IPA or a rum chata Bailey's mixture that I first started drinking at Adepticon this year.
I was gonna go with I was hoping to have a little gumption, but apparently I drank all of those, and I don't have any in the fridge. I was highly disappointed when I opened up the fridge.
That is a tasty cider. I will agree that those are hard to not drink.
Yep. So I've got another thing that I do want to put out there to the hobby portion of our podcast. Kind of a little hobby tip. On the way to Mission Critical and back, I talked a great deal with Zach Daly about some hobby things, and I'd given him some tips on some things that I do. I'm painting. And so I was like, that's probably a good thing. I should probably just pass out to everybody else. All right, so my water station, basically my rinsing cups. So the one I have is from a art supply store. It's basically one container, looks like a square Tupperware container, but it has two wells in it. So by wells, I mean two places, separate places that hold the water. So you fill them both up, and basically what you do when you're rinsing your brush is you rinse your brush off in the same one. So for me, the initial rinse is always in the left, and then after I do that and wipe it off, I will then rinse it in the right side. So it keeps your water, the dirty water, from getting into your paint a lot better than just having one paint cup that you're always rinsing out your water, or one water cup you're always rinsing out your paint cup in, right? So it gives that second wash, that second container of water stays a little cleaner because all the big junk is coming off in the first one, so you get a little more use out of there, right? So that's the first part of that tip. The second part is something that I learned in school: just a drop of dishwashing soap in your rinse water, right? It will help break up the surface tension. It will help the bristles of your brush just stay nicer longer. And it's not a lot. I mean, you don't just squeeze it in there, just put a drop or two in there, mix it up in the water, and you will really, the more you work with paints and the more you're working on wet blendings, it will actually increase the drying time of your paints a little bit. It will increase the flow of the paints a little bit, and so your blends will be a little nicer. So that is just a simple trick that anybody can use, that you will see benefits from. How big of a benefits will really depend on your level you are at your painting. The more experienced you are, the better you get, the more you'll see from that. If you're just beginning and you're slathering on thick coats of paint, you won't see as much, but it's just a good practice and habit to get in.
Yeah, and with that, I've always used, well, I shouldn't say always. When I first started out, I didn't know my ass from the hole in the ground. But in recent years, I'll say, I've been using two paint cups. One has a soapy water, like Palmolive or something crazy like that, and not a whole lot. Maybe, a couple drops in a full pint jar. And then another one that is a cleaner rinse cup. And so when I'm painting, I'll, clean out my brush in the soapy water and then rinse my brush in the cleaner water. And I've found that keeps my bristles in a point, along with cleaning them after the session and twisting them into a fine point with like Masterson's brush soap or something along those lines.
Yeah, if you don't use, if you've got really nice brushes, hopefully you already do this. But if you're just beginning, Masterson is a fine arts brush soap. It's a brush cleaner and preservative, right? So basically, after you're done painting and you've rinsed and cleaned your brushes, when they're still wet, kind of just drag them back and forth across this brick or puck, and kind of get them lathered up, and then just fold them into like a point. Now you could do that by a couple different ways. You can just kind of bend your finger a little bit so you get a crease in your knuckle and just run your paintbrush through that. Just drag it through that and it'll crease it. Ingesting chemicals, you just put it in your mouth and lick it with your tongue. Both of those will work. I'm not going to mention which one I do. I am
You
fully
taste the
aware.
weasel, don't you? You
Yeah,
suck that weasel dry.
I am fully aware from my fine arts degree that I've ingested enough paint that's what's going to kill me if work doesn't do it first. Uh, but
Yep.
or my daughter, who is now 13 and going into dating age.
Yeah, I tried to tell you.
So
You need a shotgun and a shovel.
yeah. So on the brush cleaner, there's a couple trains of thought people have. So the hard brick or bar soap type of piece, some people are not going to like, right? Because it's abrasive, because it's a hard soap block. So you're dragging your paintbrushes through there, and some people don't like that. They also make liquid ones that do the same thing, right? You're just going to kind of foam it up in your hand and kind of rub your brush through it. Either one works fine. I have had a Winsor Newton Series 7s that I've used with almost the entire Masterson's brush cleaner is gone, and I haven't had any issues with them. I will start losing some bristles now, but that's Winsor Newtons are 10 plus years old.
Yeah, I think I'm right there with you.
Yeah, the other thing is, depending on how adventurous you want to be, is you can get starch, like clothing starch, spray it. Like typically, if you can find the liquid form, that's great. Most places you can't find it, so you get the aerosol spray, spray it into like a little cup, clean your brush, dip it in that, and then basically just make a circular motion and kind of pull your brush back to that point, and then let it sit overnight with it on there. That's actually how brush companies get your original point.
So, are you talking about like the blue Stay Flow starch?
Yeah, like your faultless Monami starch, whatever you're using
Yeah. Wow.
what you're using to iron your clothing in. That's essentially what brush companies are using to get that point on originally.
That's really interesting. I'd never thought about that.
Yep, I've used it to mixed success. I've had some Games and Gears brushes that I got years ago that I had horrible experience with, and I've tried to save them that way a couple times, and it will work for about a paint session, and then you have to do the whole process over again. More of the brush itself, but the technique is still valid.
Yeah, and with Games and Gears brushes, I have not heard any painter of any skill level that has had a positive experience with them.
Yeah, unfortunately, because the way the brushes are made, the design, let me put it that way, I really like. It should really work. I should really be excited about them, and the bristles just aren't good enough to really get out. Now they have several different levels, but I have not wanted to spend the money just to try out the other different kinds. So, but that's what it is.
Yeah, and that makes sense because when you start talking about brushes, there is varying degrees of quality and there is varying degrees of price, and those two things are not always mutually exclusive.
Yep, they are definitely something you have to pay attention to. The Winsor Newtons, I am gonna say, the last several years since the quality has not been as consistent in Winsor Newton brushes. Some of that has to do with the import-export laws. Some of it has to do with maybe they are a little more lax and running on their name and trying to cut corners here and there. That that's totally speculation in my opinion, but that's my thoughts.
No, and you're not the first person that I've heard that from either. So, what brushes are out there that you would recommend?
Hold on, let me slide over and grab a brush. Jeez.
I know I'm so demanding because from when I was painting, a lot and every day, I was using Da Vinci and Rosemary and Company and having really good success with my old ass Winsor Newton Series 7s.
All right, so I'm back. All right, so Da Vinci's okay. The Raphael is all right. I've had mixed success with those two, and getting them sometimes can be weird. What I have switched to, and really is kind of what I'm picking up now, are Rosemary and Company's Klinsky Sable Series 33. They look very similar to Winsor Newton brushes. They're about the same length as the Winsor Newton. They're not quite as thick in the handle as Winsor Newton. Um, the ferrule is about the same size. The bristles are roughly the same in length, but they're not that expensive, and they do seem to hold up pretty well.
Now, where did you get those? Did you get those online? Your favorite local game store? Magic
Yep.
paintbrush elves?
Uh, yes, Magic Paintbrush Elves delivered those to me. They had to fight through the underpants gnomes to get here, but it was well worth the fight.
Well worth the fight. All
Yeah.
right.
Now, so our local store carries those. They were carrying uh, Windsor Newton, and when they started having problems, they started looking at alternatives. They post some stuff out to some of the other painters, and then they found these, and they can get them pretty readily, pretty easily, and so that's what a lot of our local painters have switched to.
Well, all right then. How about we go to the Central Music Repository?
I'm
Oh,
going to
what?
give you one. I've got one more tip.
Oh,
I
you got
wasn't
another
quite
tip?
done with tips.
All right.
Yeah. All right. So the other thing is for those of you who use a wet palette, right? We may get into explaining what a wet palette is and how that works later. But for those of you who use a wet palette, um, what I do is I have a bottle of water, right? That's what I use to fill up my wet palette. That's what I use to keep it moist throughout the paint thing. In that bottle of water, I'll put a squirt of isopropyl alcohol. Not a lot, again, just a squirt. What that does is that's going to kill the bacteria in your water. So it's going to keep the mold from growing on your sponge of your wet palette, on the paper of your wet palette. It will do some surface tension things to water, so it may evaporate a little quicker. So you may have to add a little bit more water, but the longevity of your what's the word, sponge is gonna last a little longer. And then if for those of you who don't clean your wet palette very often, the odor of mold is going to get cut down greatly by doing that also.
Yeah, and the scientist in me is cringing at some of the words that Ryan said and used interchangeably, but we're just going to let that go because it is a good tip because mold and bacteria love two things: warmth and moisture. And when you are painting, you've got a perfect little incubator for mold and bacteria.
Yep, it is. It is. We're working under lights. If you're using a normal light bulb, then it's probably pretty hot in your paint station.
So hot.
It's getting hot in here.
Right. Oh no.
You started it. All right. So that's really all the hobby tips I have right now. I could probably go on ad nauseum about other random things, but we'll just move ahead.
All right. So we're going to take a quick little musical break, and then we'll be right back.
Musical interlude.
All right. So I hope that you found that song absolutely enthralling as we did.
Oh, you just cut out on me.
Oh, great. So, Ryan, have you played any games recently?
I did. I played 2 games last night.
What?
2 games.
2 games.
Yeah. Exciting stuff. So the first one, both of these are with Akari, the same Akari list. I played tic-tac-toe in both games, which is one thing that our local group has been doing recently. Is somebody will find figure out what mission we're playing, and then everybody that comes is playing that mission that night. Outside of doing some offshoot things, but that's seemed to be something we've done more regularly lately, which I think is kind of interesting because then we're all kind of talking about it, and people are like, "Oh yeah, that's how that works," and we miss this and pay attention to that type of stuff. The first was against a military orders list that I really screwed up my first turn. I was having a conversation with people about how we have a game plan going into it, and then you start playing and everything gets all messed up as I'm setting up my stuff, and that's literally what I did. I literally moved some stuff, shot some smoke. I'm like, oh yeah, didn't want to do that yet. Now that dude can't see, so now I have to move over here. So It did not bode well for me. It was a 9-1 loss, but I did pick out some stuff that I could do. It's what really highlighted some of the changes I want to do with my Akari, some of the different things I want to use the forces to do in that list. The second game was with a guy who was playing U.S. Ariadne. Same mission, same table, and I actually end up getting the same side, deploying on the same side I deployed before. So I had a little bit of advantage just on that. Now, the guy I played was new-ish. He used to play, had stepped away for a while, and is now coming back to playing.
Yes, I believe that.
First.
Oh, I believe that he called Infinity the mistress that he just can't give up.
Yes, that is exactly what he did. He actually is just going to do his Ariana, get it to the 300 points he likes, and that's all he's going to do. He's not going to branch out. So he says. He's also a big fan of Malifaux, and yeah, Malifaux's getting ready to release their 3rd edition, so we'll see what happens with that comes out. So I had him deploy first, but he chose to go second. And we were playing tic-tac-toe, right? So the idea is that, you can go around and score a bunch of points on the last turn and win the game. The problem is, with that is the way he set up, he left me some clear lanes of fire from my deployment zone to some of his models. So I was able to set up ready to shoot them, spin an order, and kill a bunch of his dudes right away. I had 3 Yon-Yons in this list, who 2 of them dropped in on his side where I knew they could get around and hit his link team. 1 Yon-Yon, I just really ran out of orders I could spend on him because he was just tanking armor saves and just dropping chain rifle templates down. Yeah, he was tanking a lot of armor saves. But then we talked about it after, we kind of talked about through it because he was kind of relearning the game. So I was letting him make some mistakes just so we could talk to, because, the burned hand learns best kind of thought.
Hot glass looks like cold glass. That's for sure.
Yeah. He made some moves and I'm like, okay, well, on one case, he idled on one of his guys and I was like, okay, well, I'm going to shoot. And then he was like, okay, well, I'm going to dodge. And I'm like, okay, what are you trying to do? Because that doesn't make any sense. You're not doing anything but giving me a free chance on your turn to kill your dude, and it's costing you an order. Well, I was gonna dodge around. I was like, oh, you don't get the 2 inches on the active turn.
And the active turn, yep.
I was like, so what you could do is move around this console here, right? That's your first order's move, and then I could shoot at you, and you can dodge here, or you can shoot back at me, because let's look at it. Okay, you're going to be hitting me with 3 dice on a 9 or something like that, or dodging with 1 dice on like a 12. Right? So your chance of dodge per dice is higher, right? But you have more dice. So to me, the 3 dice on a 9 wins out over the 1 dice on a 12. Right, and the chance that you're going to wound me. So he's like, yeah, that makes sense, which he did, and he did hit me. So it was advantageous. I was like, if you'd have dodged, and it wouldn't have gotten you anything, you would have stayed alive. But
yeah,
I think, had a guy.
I think that's a more important, issue is idle. You don't move. You're not doing anything, and then dodge. You're still sitting in that same spot. And you're not advancing towards your objective, whether it's tic-tac-toe, whether it's comm center, engineering deck, any of the missions. Movement is life, and if you are not moving, you're dead.
Yeah, I think it was really, he was thinking he was going to be able to dodge the benches around and get cover, but it, as we talked to her, like, oh, that doesn't make sense. And then we also just talked to some other random stuff that happened, that Zant came in as Van Zant does, but I knew he was going to come in, so the only thing Van Zant could do was go up against an Alpha Seed, which he did. He ended up finally killing it, but it took him good 4 or so orders because I would turn, so because I had to keep my line of sight up the table and on Van Zant. So I would turn because he had stuff that could hit me on both sides. So I couldn't really just turn around and completely face Van Zant. So, so I turned so I could see Van Zant. So I spent another order on Van Zant, who moved then now out of my line of sight. But then we did a face-to-face, and nothing happened on that face-to-face, or he hit me and I made the armor save. Well, now he's out of my line of fire, so now he has a free shot with Van Zant. Now, if I had turned, he would have then had a free shot from behind me with another weapon, right? So it was really kind of a 6 of one and half dozen the other. The alpha seed was going down, it's somehow, but I needed to just make him burn orders as much as possible without trying to get him completely free shots.
Yeah, and I see that the more games you played, and we talked about this on the last episode, in that, when you first start playing your games as a beginner, there's so much stuff to try to take into consideration. And that the more games you play, it actually gets easier to play the game, but it also opens up a lot more complexity and nuances of the game.
Yeah, and that's what we discussed a little bit after the game, too, is like, you just got to play more, you got to figure out how things work. New people come by every time we're playing at our local shop, and we kind of tell them the basic ideas behind it, and then I always tell them, I was like, it's a great game, I really like this game, but it has a massive learning curve right at the beginning, because you're trying to figure out how things interact, and that's big. And then once you kind of get that down, then you're trying to figure out how can I utilize this model to do the thing that I want it to do. And in some cases you can't. That model's not great at that. You could do it. You're gonna be struggling. You're not gonna be happy about it. But maybe change the way you're using that model, or maybe look at this model who may be doing it the same thing a little better.
Yeah, and I think, when you and I were talking about that game in particular with the newish or second to new player, he had a heavy rocket launcher and he had a light rocket launcher. And I think in our minds, we see a rocket launcher, in air quotes because that's great radio. We see a rocket launcher on paper and we think, oh yeah, that's a badass weapon, I'm going to take that. And then we don't realize the actual game mechanic behind it with the range bands. And so, I think you were talking about you outranged him with an HP or HMG, or hold on a second, there's a cat rubbing up against the microwave.
You've got against the microwave?
Or the microphone.
Yeah, I was going to say you've got a growling going on. Yeah, so my Alpha Z has an HMG, and he had Rosie who had a rocket launcher, and I was to outrange him. He was like, oh, I'm going to shoot with Rosie. And then he looked at the range bands and he was like, oh man, this rocket launcher's not great. I'm like, yeah, it's the fire that's the big deal to rocket launchers, but you need to be in that mid-range band. You got to push up on those. So but again, that's a lot of that is really figuring out how you use those pieces, what ARO pieces are. Take away from our game that I talked to him about. I was like, hey, since you wanted to go second, which is great, but if I kill all of your specialists, it doesn't matter because you can't flip the switches. So what I talked about, what he should have done is, knowing that I was going to deploy or go first and he was deploying first, is he should have turtled up and hid people, left nobody out except for camo markers. He's got a ton of camo markers, right? You can leave those up because then I'm either spending orders to discover them, or he's getting pot shots as AROs. And that's a better use of an ARO than a model sitting up there like, all right, I'm going to get one shot, maybe two shots because of a link team or whatnot. For him, that would have been a better use. Tuck all your stuff in, kind of around corners, force me to spend orders to get around to get to you. I will say the game ended and it was only like 4-1, so I did not crush him by any means. But it was just, it looked like it at the end of the game. I had lost only a couple models and he only had 2 guys left. Not about killing stuff. The mission was not about killing stuff.
And, one of the things a lot of beginners forget or don't realize is the idea that a 4-1 is not a crushing loss. This isn't football or baseball where that is a shellacking in any way, shape, or form. It's more of, that's a really close game because on the last turn, if you were able to flip some switches, then you're going to be able to turn that tide completely around.
Yeah, I will say the first game I played, the best was as we deployed. I deployed my first round, and I talked to my list, and I'm like, you see 8 models and a camo token. He's like, okay, so is this limit insertion? And I go, no. And he just looked, what? Nope. He goes, okay, so he places reserve model, and then I place from my reserve model. And I go, okay. And I go, these are everything you see, including the camo marker and the first order group. And he's like, but you're not limit insertion. Nope. I just stared at him. And the best part, because I was going first, so I'm literally like, all right, Mike, just tell me to go, and then all of this is going to be revealed to you as I drop 3 Yan-Yans, right? The second group. But just the look of him trying to figure out what the heck is going on, and then you could see he got it later. But Clayton, who was standing next to her, and Clayton were both just cracking up because we're like, it's not that big of a deal. Just go, and all will be revealed.
And that does speak to a larger aspect of playing more games and growing your meta or your community as a whole. Because the more things that you see, to Mike's defense, he has been playing Clayton. Clayton has, been running a lot of OSS. There's a lot of TO camo aspects. And so, Mike's doing the battle calculus of, okay, this guy's probably this much, this guy's probably this much, this guy's probably this much. And it's one battle group. There's something that I'm not seeing. And that is actually a true statement because your Yan-Yans are off the board.
Yeah, it was pretty funny. I will have to say. Now, my Yan-Yans didn't do as great in that game against him, but they're still fun. But I don't think they work the way I really want them to work in this list. So I'm revamping how the support pieces go. How about you? Did you play?
I did. I played Clayton and his OSS, and we worked on our secret narrative mission rules expansion thing. That if you listen to the last episode, and you know that on the way back from Mission Critical, we have the idea of running a narrative event here in Kansas City at a date to be announced later, but we want to make sure that we get things right. And in my game against Clayton, we did not play tic-tac-toe. We played Comm Center, and it was Clayton's OSS against my U.S. Ariadna Ranger Force, and it was a very interesting game because of the narrative rules that we have. I think Clayton's second order, I revealed a camo marker, and he was like, oh, that puts me into a very interesting situation because I was not expecting that. And I'm like, yeah. And then maybe 4 or 5 orders into my turn, he was like, I don't think Rob really understands what we were trying to do here. I'm like, no, I do understand. I'm wanting to kill people.
So how many points was this game you were playing?
It was 193 for the record.
Oh, so you're playing a 200-point game that you brought 103 points. Okay, so
yes,
I was 100-point list to a 200-point game. Okay.
Yes. Although, maximum killing against you was excellent.
Though I do have a question. 193. There's 7 points you couldn't spend?
I could have thrown a war core in there, but I was like, nah. I want to keep it pure Rangers.
Were you in one order group? Or
no,
2?
I was in 2.
And you couldn't spend
I could.
7 points?
I could.
I mean,
I could have got a war core. No.
There wasn't a ranger you could change weapons for or anything like that?
No, I think the cheapest ranger is like 10 or 11 points.
Yeah, but is there not like a 12-point one who gets a,
Oh, I'm sure there was.
Or something like that. Okay.
Yeah. But I was just like, nope, we're going to do this thing. And so I did illustrate some concerns of the narrative aspect that we have come up with, and I think there's going to be some communication on the Narrative Council chat group.
All right, sounds good.
Yeah, so it was a lot of fun. It was it was fun putting Clayton into situations where I don't think Clayton had expected to be in those situations where, and this is a really good segue into the rule of the episode.
All right, rule of the episode.
Rule of the episode. So the rule of the episode is ambush camouflage. And ambush camouflage allows you to place a camo marker along with that represents your model along with an extra camo marker. And the units in the game that can do this is, primarily Ariadne with Spetsnaz and Sturlocks and Vasily and hard cases, but also the Combine has the Mentor that can do this. So what it allows you to do is kind of play the mind game with your opponent of there's two camo markers here. One of them, could be something like a mine. It could be nothing. It could be a model. It could be whatever. And you are allowed to move your camo marker that is a model as long as it is still a camo marker. But as soon as you reveal that, the other camo marker goes away.
Yeah, and so, what you think about it is you're placing one model, right, but two camo markers. Now, they both have to be placed legally, so you can't have one that would be like, say, one that places in your deployment zone. That's the max it can deploy. That's the model, and then you can't put the ambush camouflage as in forward deployment, right? If the model does not have that rule.
Right.
Now you can, if the model has forward deployment level 2, put the model like in the deployment zone as a camo marker, and then put the ambush camo marker up front, right? Because it's legally deployed, but you just got to make sure the camo marker is still legally deployed. And that's something that my second game, Bobby Irish, and I chatted about during his deployment. I was like, it's got to still be legal deployed. It can't be, we just kind of chatted through that, and I didn't know what he was bringing. I was just talking about just camo in general.
Yep, and that's important because it also plays into the rule of mine layer. And so if you've got, a forward deploying dude that can be put on the midfield exactly 24 inches into your 48-inch deployment zone, if you're, all the way up forward observing, you can't go 49 inches or 29 inches. You can't put it on the other side, even though that 5-inch extra is within your zone of control. That's kind of a wrong thing to do.
Yeah, and so that's another thing to remember. They still have to be within zone of control of each other, so there's still the 8-inch distance between their markers. Now, one of the tactics that I think is very interesting with that is, especially if the model has forward deployment or infiltration or something along those lines, right? As you put the model, in most cases, people will put the model in cover and like up on a building or so on, and then drop the ambush camouflage marker somewhere else. But what is also interesting is if you put the decoy up in like an ARO spot, like up on a building in a perch, so people are like, oh, that's a good point, and then you put the actual model camo marker like either out in the open or just on a corner, so it doesn't look as conspicuous, because the mental game you play there then is an important factor too, because they don't know, are those two models? Is one of them a mine? Is one of them just a decoy? But the initial thought is, if you see a really good sniper point, or ARO point, and there's a camo token sitting up there, oh, that's got to be the model, is the immediate mindset we'll take. And when it's not, then that throws people, because they may spend a ton of orders to go around that or discover that or do something to remove it from its effectiveness when it doesn't matter at all.
Right, and that was the exact situation that I put Clayton in. Is he rolled one of his flash bots, or his flash pulse bots, up the flank, and it was, okay, what are you gonna do? What are you gonna do? And then I was like, okay, you are now in my good range. I am going to reveal that this is a hard case with a tactical bow. And he was like, oh, that is perplexing. I didn't see that coming. And that is one of the things that I think Infinity really hammers home in a very subtle way, is it is a game of patience. I think it was you playing one of the guys from Oklahoma in one of our local tournaments where you let, I think it was Pookie. Pookie allowed, one dude to go by, two dudes to go by, three dudes to go by, and then revealed his hidden TO camo. And camouflage is one of the things that makes Infinity, in my opinion, very unique game, because all the different levels have different flavors, and the way that you play those different flavors is very, very unique.
Yeah, so he actually allowed me to position. We were playing tic-tac-toe, ironically, in that tournament, and I was positioned around and was covering and waiting because I knew he had one. I knew he had to have something, or I assumed. And he was playing Toha, and so he had the Calypsos, and it literally appeared, but was in my back arc of everybody, and all I needed to do was flip the one switch. So even if the dude died, it didn't matter because I couldn't shoot at him until he actually flipped it, and then I could do my stuff to turn and face. So it was really that patient piece, right? And that's a 30-point model. So, you play down the entire game.
Oh, that's a good point. That's a really good point.
I did it on my second game. I had a ninja in hidden deployment up by the marker who I didn't reveal until my third. I didn't have anything he could do. It was a ninja killer hacker with tac bow, so he wasn't going to do anything anyways. But I didn't spend the command order to move him over to the other combat group to have orders. I didn't do any of that. I just let it sit there. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm just going to assume I'm going to take that one centerpiece on his one order. And then I'm going to spend the orders doing everything else I need, which is what had happened. But I was running the risk of him failing that whip roll because, dice are a thing. But it is one of those gambles you play, right? You're just like, okay, well, let's see if this works out.
Yeah, and I think that is, a very good nutshell to describe all of the camouflage. It's a gamble. You can spend a lot of orders trying to remove it. You can spend a lot of orders, trying to move something up to deal with that situation. But all in all, it makes the game very flavorful. It makes the game very cinematic, which is amazing.
Yeah, I mean, and so back to our rule of the ambush camo, I think that the two camo markers that allows you to place, when you start pairing that with other models, so if you have two of the models that have that, that's 4 camo markers you're putting down. If you start stacking those around, it really sets up some interesting things. Let's just say you have another camo guy who doesn't have the ambush. Camo markers all in the same area, and somebody coming through there really has to try to run the risk of getting a ton of AROs, not seeing the right model. If you end up having a mine layer there too, I mean, there's a whole lot of stuff, a whole lot of problems that just creates for your opponent or for you if you're on the receiving end, that you've really got to figure out how I'm going to do that. Now, what you want to avoid is stacking them in a way that somebody can intuitive tack a flamer or a chain rifle or a blast weapon can hit a bunch of them. You want to avoid bunching them or lining them up at all possible.
Yeah, and you literally just described how my deployment was against Clayton, because I had 2 hard cases and 3 foxtrots. And so because it was comm center, you've got that exclusion zone. And so I had a whole bunch of camo markers that were all stacked up in very, opportunistic spots, because you're right there on that midline, or not the midline, but you're on that back line of the 3 markers. And it's just like, okay, I'm just going to flip this switch and move out. And I'm going to flip this switch and I'm going to move out. And I'm going to flip this switch. And then Clayton's already looking at the score going, oh, shit, I didn't see all those forward observers as camo markers. What other specialists out there? Because I get extra points if I kill those guys. And it's like, you don't see any. That there's camo markers still on the board because of those decoys, but you don't see any other people. So he's trying to figure out that puzzle piece of how do I deal with those camo markers, because they probably are forward observers, or they probably are something that I'm going to need to deal with.
Yep. It just adds to part of the Infinity universe that I think that you and I both really like, is just the complexity you can have within the same game, playing for lack of a different game. Like I could be playing, I'm gonna come up, here's my really heavily armored dudes, and they're just gonna beat stick their way through, and you're playing, all right, I've got a bunch of weedy dudes, but here's my shell game. Which is the right guy? Which is the real
Which
guy?
is the right guy? Yeah, keep your eye on the ball. Keep your eye on the ball. Keep your eye on the ball. Okay, where's the ball? Shit, I didn't know that there was a ball.
Yep, I think so. Um, I think that's pretty much about all we're going to talk about: ambush, camouflage, and then other camouflage tactics. Really.
Yeah, no, I think so. So let's take another musical break, and then we will get on to the main show topic. All right, that was a wonderful musical interlude, wasn't it?
So that's now, my favorite song. I just really.
I know. I love that song. Yeah, just really, the snappy beat. Yeah, you know, really, just makes you want to tap your feet. Really yeah. Stuff.
Now, I mean, it's no Phil Collins.
But... No, it is no Sussudio by any stretch of the imagination, and to even consider that it is in the same vein as Sussudio is just pure blasphemy.
Okay, but I mean, you know, he has more than just that song. I mean,
that is true.
His first solo album, Face Value, you know, that's really what broke him out, made him his own man.
Made him his own man. I couldn't agree. I couldn't agree anymore. I couldn't.
I mean, that was such hits like In the Air Tonight. Come on, anybody who was a big fan of Miami Vice, you know that one.
Well, not only that, but think about how many times that song itself has been remade, and you know. The pop culture classic, The Hangover. Mike Tyson punched a dude out into the drum solo.
Yep. Good times, everybody. Good times.
Good times. All right. So, so the faction Glass Slipper. So, as everyone knows, the fairy tale Cinderella, there is the glass slipper that only fits the princess. And we have talked on this show about the rule of cool. You know, what attracted me into Infinity was the Marut. What attracted you into Infinity may have just been that one model. But what is the idea past the rule of cool? So, Ryan, why don't you talk about that for a little bit?
Yeah, so I started thinking about this in the last couple weeks. Is a lot, you know, Rob and I both preach all the time, like, hey, if you find a model you really like, that, you know, cool, play it, figure out how to use it. It's got a purpose. There's nothing wrong with it. And so we talk a lot about the rule of cool. Other podcasts rate models on, hey, would you buy that model just because it exists? And people are like, yeah, right. So a lot of times when I'm looking at a game, I will say, okay, I really like the look of these models of this faction. That's where I start. Right, but then after I've played a little bit, I start thinking about what about this faction do I like? Is it just the models? Is it the idea behind them? So for me, I started with military orders. Part of that is I picked up the Ice Storm box, right? And the military orders, the Pano stood out a little bit more to me. I really like the idea of the space murder Catholics and the knights of space, right? The future knights kind of. So that's kind of where I started going down that. And so that really was the idea of the military orders that I liked. Is like there's this holy knight order that still exists in space, right? Then the Morats appealed to me because I liked their models too, but I also liked the idea of they were just a war faction. Here's just our hierarchy is who's the baddest, and we're going to go at that, right? And so I keep delving in. So books come out, and I've reading more of the fluff, and I was like, you know, Akari, I really like the idea of the Akari, not model-wise as much, but thematically and the story behind them. So here's a guy who was basically lost everything, right? Was shunned, and he was just like, screw it. And so he started this mercenary company really with a nefarious plan, right? He was like, whoever the highest bidder, that's who we're going to work for. We don't care the job, right? And it kind of appealed to me just because I was like, that's not who I am in real life. And so I'm like, I always.
That's what you say. That's what all the serial killers say.
Yeah. I end up playing the evil faction a lot. Although I'm not playing Aleph, so I guess that is the most evil faction. But
All perspective, baby. All perspective.
Yeah, I got whatever. So then the new book came out, and I really liked Toha. I liked all the stuff, and so Spiral Core was out in that, and I was gonna pick up Spiral Core, but I've made myself for those of you know, I've made them. I'm not going to buy other models until I get my 300 points of Onyx done. Well, I have 300 points of Onyx done now, right? And I was going to work on the Morats, and then it's like I've got plenty of stuff. I'm not going to buy them, but I really decided I had all the Akari stuff, so I was like, you know what? I really kind of feel like doing something a little different, so I'm going to go down that route. Now, I bought pieces to convert those, but I'm not counting that because that was not models that I'm buying for those models. Those are models I'm buying to use for this Akari thing. But I've been in a conversation about Deshat a lot in the last month or so, and so I was like looking at their army list and what they could take, and I'm like, yeah, I like some of the stuff you can do here. I like some of the pieces. Some of the models it can bring. I'm like, da da da. Well, I didn't read the Deshat background until last weekend. And when I read it, I was like, damn, this is another cold-hearted mafia.
Bad people.
And I'm like, similar to Akari. And so I was attracted to them before I even read it. So I was like, that seems really interesting to me that I was attracted to them. Like Starco, sold the Soldiers of Fortune group, those guys. What is
Drews?
No, the other one that just came out.
Oh, the oh shit.
Yeah, totally lost it. Anyways, those seem like Starco and this other one who I literally have no idea why I can't think of what they're called.
Foreign Company.
Thank you. They really seem ironically like good guys. Like, oh look, here's the Starco. We've got all the famous people. Everyone watches us. Look at how cool we are. And I'm like, yeah, I have no interest in that. So that's where I found this stuff really interesting on how my mind consciously and subconsciously works when I'm looking at the games. I played chaos stuff and fantasy and ogres in fantasy because they were just big stompy mad dudes that were just beating shit up. They weren't good or evil, they were just them, and that kind of appeals to me. So as I matured in this game, I've noticed that that's what I get attracted to in sectorials, not necessarily because this is the best. It can bring a lot of cool stuff, which Shock can bring a lot of cool stuff, but the story behind them then starts appealing to me. And so that's kind of what I was thinking about, and was like, I wonder what drives that. If people play a game just because this is the newest army. I know a lot of other game companies out there, like they'll introduce a new faction or new army, and that army everybody plays because that's the army that wins. People go on like, okay, so what won the last 4 tournaments? Okay, I'm going to print out that list. Those are the models I'm buying because that's what's winning the games. And I don't feel that in Infinity, which I think is great because then it allows people to experiment more. You allow some diversity. We didn't go to Mission Critical and see, oh, great, here's and 25 of them are Toha or whatever, right? It was very diverse. But I think there's really something about the world of Infinity that really kind of drives this. How do you focus? What do you look at when picking sectorials? What do you look at when picking armies? How do you develop your army?
So along that same line, one of the things that you asked in the first part of the show was really there wasn't a ranger that you couldn't fit in for 7 points, and I was like, no. And yes, I could put a Warcore in there, but I'm trying to run kind of a themed list, or I shouldn't say themed list, a storyline event, because the resistance on Mars was betrayed by the Black Lotus.
No. No.
Yeah.
No.
Oh no,
Nope.
they were.
Nope.
That one Drew's
not,
person that we
not,
hired
not
and paid good money for, he turned tail when the going got tough. He took our reinforcements and he just was like, nope, this is I'm out.
Nope. He continued to hold his ground and do the job he was intended to do. If you remember, the Black Lotus thrived through all of the discord and distress and destruction. Literally,
Yeah,
what
you
we were
tell
intended to do. Yeah, somebody's here apparently.
Evidently,
But
your
so
dog doorbell went off.
The Black Lotus, the Black Lotus did not betray anyone. They are true and true where they are supposed to be.
Right. Well, you tell your story the way that you want to, and I will tell my story the way that I want to, because I have been looking through the non-aligned armies and looking at what remnants of an Ariadna force would be. And I keep falling into the foreign company with the idea that, we are the remnants of the survivors of an Ansari station who are looking to root out the Black Lotus. And I'm kind of drawn to this whole thematic thing that spans several factions. It spans several armies in the true Corvus Belli Infinity world.
Yeah, it does. I think that is one thing about the mercenary groups that are really cool. Apparently, my daughter's home. If you can hear a lot of giggling, and she has friends. So I'm gonna get up and shut the door real quick. So hold on a second.
Seriously, you're gonna need a shotgun and a shovel.
All right, I'm back. All right, so the non-aligned armies outside of the JSA are all made up of this intermixing of stuff. How do you feel about that from a gaming perspective? Do you think, because I know a lot of people are like, well, I don't like to add mercenaries because, hey, my faction is weak in shooting, and now I can hire this mercenary group that's really good in shooting, and now my weakness of my faction is no longer there.
Is it the weakness of the faction or the weakness of how the player plays that thing? And the reason I say that is because are we looking at this from an old game point of view where a mercenary unit that could do shooting very well could be purchased at a premium to plug that gap? Or is it more of, I don't need those guys because I'm a beat face player and I'm going to take all the beat face units?
Well,
So I don't know how to really answer the question as it is being asked.
Well, I think a lot of it is from old games that we used to play, right? You could have my army that I'm playing is all close combat oriented. They are weak in shooting, so I have to get into combat. But now I'm allowed to take this mercenary group. Hey, this mercenary group, I can add 4 cannons to this close combat. So I no longer have that weakness.
Right. And the reason I asked that question of the manner that I did is because those old games had phases. Right? It was a movement phase, it was a shooting phase, and it was a close combat phase. Where, to your point of, I've got a really good close combat army, I essentially skip or play, pinochle during my shooting phase. So now in Infinity, because we don't have those phases, it's an order. It's a, here's my short skill, what is your arrow? Here's my short skill, or here's my long skill, what is your arrow? I think that it's a different mechanic, and the mercenary groups are in my opinion, a very refreshing way to look at different combinations within a story.
Yeah, and I think one of the things, because I know Randy doesn't really like the whole non-aligned army 2 mercenary groups. He doesn't like all of that stuff, but I think the reason being is because of the old mindset, right? So I think yes, it takes some of the non-aligned armies take like, oh, I'm going to take the best from this faction, the best from this faction. But I think what they do to really mitigate that is like, hey, this faction has 60 things, and this faction has 60 things. You're going to get 10 from that and 10 from that. So you only have 20 things where they have 60 things. And I think they do a good job of kind of evening out that way, as in your selections are less. I mean, a lot of times your fire team options are varied drastically between one from the other.
And I agree with that. And I think also what we saw with the JSA uprising, in that here is Pan O. Pan O is going to supply, the rebels, the uprising movement itself, with these weapons, and we're only going to give you, the top tier of midfield weapons. We're not going to give you the full entourage. We're not going to give you the full Monty, because that may turn around and bite us in the ass. But we're going to help you, because it's going to stick a nice hot poker in the eye of the Yujing Jade Empire. And so I like that mercenary aspect from a geopolitical standpoint.
Yeah. All right. So back to the really main topic now that we got off it a little bit. What do you look at when you're playing? I mean, I know that you picked up U.S. Ariadne because you have a military history, right? And so that had some influence on there. You're still playing that. But what other things do you look for? Are you literally driven by rule of, or do you go into the fluff?
I've started going into the fluff a little bit more with Daedalus Falls. Just because I'm very intrigued by the way that Corvus Belli has, set the stage with the dire foes, the uprising, and I'm intrigued with what Daedalus Falls holds for the game as an overall, company, as an overall story arc. So I'm getting into more of the fluff lines, but I haven't had time to really sit down and read.
Now you're also playing in the role-playing game that a local guy's hosting. So do you think that drives any of your decisions, and like the character you're going to play in that role-playing game, or the stuff you're wanting to do or read in that?
Actually, I had to drop out of that game because of real life stuff like landscaping and getting, tendonitis in both elbows.
You should probably take a break and not lift anything for a while.
Yeah, like, bags of rock.
Yeah, that's my professional medical opinion.
You're a nurse practitioner too? I didn't know.
Yeah, apparently anybody can be a nurse practitioner.
I know. And that is no offense to anyone that is a nurse practitioner or is in the medical field. It was just a thing that happened today when I went to the nurse practitioner. She told me to stop lifting things that were heavy.
Yeah, I mean, it's sage advice, though. Sage advice.
Sage advice. Words to live by.
All right, so back to the show topic. So if you were a new player coming in, or even looking back to when you started, what do you look at? I mean, are you purely driven at the initial onset of the rule of cool, and then as you start getting into the game, delve off from there?
Yeah, in all honesty, I think I am driven by the rule of cool. And I think for me, that really comes from being a hobbyist painter type guy. For instance, the hard case. In my game against Clayton this week, I literally had 3 of them on the board, or 2 of them on the board. I forget now that I've had a couple drinks in me. And I still do not have a hard case model painted, because for whatever reason, the cowboy hat on that model just drives me insane. And I have been talking with Scott Tipsword, friend of the show, about Anvil Industries.
Damn it! We have to pay him royalties every time we say his name.
Just give him another shot of Malort; he'll be fine. But
we've been the Malort.
I know. Give him another one; he'll be fine. It's Malort. But back to the topic at hand. The rule of cool, because I do not like the cowboy hat, I've had a hard time with the cowboy hat. I've been looking at Anvil Industries individual heads, because they've got mercenaries with ball caps. They've got mercenaries or heads with boonie caps, which really appeals to my ranger sensibilities and militaristic history that you talked about. I like those heads because, a reverse ball cap fits me. I probably should reach out to Joe Rogers and ask how he did his trucker hats for his Krakow and Renegades, and adapt something very similar to that so that I can get hard cases on the board. I like the idea of how those models look.
Yeah, so you're speaking of Anvil Industries, right? And so I would like to make a comment. So we've mentioned Warstein Studios, the last 2 episodes, Anvil Industries now, and a couple other companies, the paintbrushes and all that stuff. So I would like to put out there that PFP is not sponsored by any of these people. So if we mention a product or a company on the cast, it's because it's something we have actually had experience with, that we like, that we've taken some use for. In some cases, like Warstein Studio, we do have a connection because we've met Josh a couple times now.
He gave us blats. You ply us with liquor or alcohol,
Yeah, so
it's a thing.
Yeah, but I just kind of want to put that out there. We're not these are not paid advertising. We're not.
No, and to that point,
if there's not some reciprocals.
Yeah, if we're talking about it, it's because we as gamers are looking at it. We as gamers are using it. And, our mistakes, our triumphs, if it's something that we can use to, pass on to you guys that are the listeners, then we're going to do it.
Yeah, but the same goes if we have a bad experience with something, for instance, like we already said, the games against brushes, we're going to mention that stuff too, because if we can save you from spending your money on that stuff when we don't feel that when we feel there are better options out there, we'll do that too. Now, if you are somebody who does produce a product in the hobby and you want to send it to us for us to look at and then review, we're happy to do that, but bear in mind, if we don't like it, we're going to say we don't like it.
Yep. Sorry. Truth. It cuts both ways.
Yep. All right. So, how do you think we did on that? Should we keep going on the main show topic, or should we move along?
I think we're good. I think we can wrap it up.
All right. Wrap it up.
Wrap. That's the fabulous Thunderbirds.
Not Phil Collins.
Not Phil Collins. Not any of his solo work or his collaborative work, such as Genesis.
Yep. All right. So, well, this has been another episode. We've got the second one of season 3 now finishing up, getting ready to get out there. Again, as always, you can reach us at the Flash. Let me try that.
Wow.
Again.
Wow, those rum and cokes are really starting to take effect.
It's only one, but I mean, it's not like it's a small glass. Although I will say I had a hell of a time speaking last night too, and I wasn't drinking then.
Maybe you should have been.
Yeah, no. All right, so you can reach us on Facebook at Personal Flash Paper. If you don't know how to use Facebook and get a hold of us, just don't, because it's just not worth it.
Ask probably one of your kids or one of your neighbor's kids.
We're on there on Facebook a significant amount of times of the day because we have smartphones and we sit at desks down. Reach out to us there. There is a Twitter at Flash Paper News, but I don't do anything with that. Randy was, but I don't know if Randy's doing anything with it now. There's the email at personalflashpaperinfinity@gmail.com. I do have that synced to my phone, so I can get those throughout the day. Please leave comments on iTunes. It's how people find us. It's how people get rated. Positive and negative. I mean, Rob and I are going to, if we review something we don't like it, we're going to tell you we prefer the same for you. Honesty is always the best there because it allows us to improve and do things that the community would like to spend their time listening to, because the fact that any of you just spend your day listening to Rob and I ramble for an hour still amazes me. But that's why we keep doing that, because people still like listening to it like something to fill their ear holes.
Yep. And everybody's got a commute. Well, I shouldn't say everybody, because, there are times that I work from home. So, but...
Rob, we do not work from home in our company. That is not an approved
whatever.
Terminology.
Ain't nobody that we work with listening to this fucking podcast.
It's well, a lot of them know about it.
They know about it, but they ain't listening to it. Yeah. At least by this point in the episode, they've probably been like, "Oh my god, I listen to these people enough during the course of my day. I don't know what they're talking about. I'm turning this off."
Yeah, good point. But for those of you who are listening, the proper terminology is working off-site. So,
Yeah. What Ryan said, because, he's the political correctness guy.
Yeah,
Anywho.
I had to do that training, had to develop that training.
Yeah. So, anyway, we appreciate it. You listening to us ramble on for an hour and a half or so. And with that, dice are fickle bitches.
Peace out, people! Hail Hydra.
Background music. Flying species. The yellow flying cog. Los Pilotos. Tell me so. The use of these human works of music is granted under the current Creative Commons license terms and agreements. From the freemusicarchive.org from the artists as listed.
I'm back!
Yeah, you are.
That was really weird.
That was. I was pontificating, and then just all of a sudden you were gone. User in your channel has timed out. I was like, no, he hasn't.
Yeah, because I was like, Rob, I've lost you. Rob. And then it dropped the connection. I'm like, interesting.
So yeah, I was talking about Anvil Industries and the heads, and I'm going to have to edit the shit out of this, but yeah.